from Idaho down to California, and it was early in the morning, and I was outside of Winnemucca about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and I was by myself, and I'm out of breath. Okay. As I was driving along, it was out in the desert area, and there was virtually uninhabited.
Right.
And a car came up behind me with two inhabitants who they started following right on my bumper. And I became concerned because it became apparent that they were really interested in getting me stopped. And they would pull up alongside and motion me over and things like that. And I was afraid that I was afraid they were going to
assault you, rob you, whatever. Yeah, sure, that'd be natural.
So as we went along, this played out for several miles, and they kept motioning for me to pull over, and they come up alongside, and I became quite fearful. Well, the oddest thing happened. I had a flat tire, and I could feel the car start to sway.
Sure.
And I pulled up to a stop, and off to the right was a house, and this car pulled up along and stopped behind me, and I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to get out, and somebody came out of this house to a pickup that was running. I mean, this was the only house in the area. There was nothing else around.
Right.
And he walked out and he looked, and one of the people in the car pointed to this guy, and then they went ahead and pulled on by me and took off. So I got out and I looked at the man, and he was doing something around the pickup, and so I went ahead and got my tire out and changed it and went on my way. Well, this left, it made me quite fearful.
Yes.
Well, on the way back from California back to Idaho, I looked for this place. I wanted to stop, and it left such a mark on me psychologically.
Sure.
I found the place. It was totally uninhabited. No windows, no doors, just a little shack.
Yes. And what do you think happened to you? I mean,
I honestly don't know. I honestly feel that something kept me from being harmed.
Something wanted to warn you.
Yes.
Well,
that's these two guys away is what happened.
That's quite a story. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi.
Where are you, sir?
I'm in Alaska.
Alaska, all right.
I was in the United States Marine Corps, and I was a sniper. And I went to Grenada, and I got hit in the knee with a bullet. And from pictures in the family, it was my great-great-grandfather in a Civil War uniform that sat down and froze my leg. And the Grenada is a jungle. And he said, "Everything will be okay, boy. Everything will be okay." And this is the first time I've talked about it other than to the military psychologist. And
all right, if you don't mind, I want to be sure I understand. You were part of the invasion force. You were a sniper. You were in Grenada.
Yeah, my job was to make sure none of the Cubans got into the students at the university.
And so you were stationed there, and you were just going to take them out if you had to.
Yes. And an anti-sniper got me. My A-gunner ended up getting him.
Hit you in the leg?
Yeah, in the knee.
Oh, God.
Well, it went from the knee, at the end of my military career, went from the knee up around the pelvis bone and out the other ankle. The bullet traveled all.
What a horrible injury.
Yeah, it hurt. Very much so.
And so you were laying there?
Yeah, I instantly fell. There was nothing I could do. And like I say, through pictures of the family photo album, it was I think it'd be he was in the Civil War, and it'd be three great-grandfathers sat down and froze my leg. My leg was frozen, not cauterized. It was frozen.
Frozen.
The whole wound, which is something nobody's been able to explain. And he said, "Everything will be okay now, boy. Everything will be okay."
And left?
Yeah.
That's eerie. What did the medics say?
Medics, they were just asking me what we'd done, how we'd done this, where did we get ice. Nobody could understand. The psychologist told me that it was in the lust of battle and that I'd lost a lot of blood and that I wasn't sure what was happening. But my spotter, who was also a sniper, he felt something cold as he was taking the other man out. And he has shot before. It wasn't, it's not the coldness you feel when you take a man out.
I understand.
It was completely different. And, I was scared, but at the same time, there was this great feeling of security and just the joy of knowing that I had a family member there, because I really thought that the pain that I was feeling, I knew where the bullet went out. I didn't know what the damages were.
That's the most incredible story I've ever heard, and I really appreciate your call, sir. Thank you. Wow. For that one, I'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Activity, they don't see things. Mm-hmm. But electrical sockets burning out, doors getting slammed. Her father came out to the house. He is in construction, a contractor. Did some work on the sockets, and toasters would plug in, and then they'd burn out. One day, a woman friend of hers came over to pay her a visit. Comes into the house, has a small 3 or 4-year-old child. The child says he sees a lady in the hallway.
Oh.
A little while later, he's playing in the hallway. Door slams shut. The woman, the mother of the child, and the woman who owns the house, it takes him 20 minutes to get the door unstuck, at which point the mother becomes hysterical. The little kid is scared because the lady he had felt or thought he had seen the lady there. They finally did get the door unstuck. There was no reason for the door being stuck. Mother and child left the house, haven't been back since. Theory. You were talking about how a lot of these people get separated from their bodies. The Indians and a lot of people believe that people who are addicted to drugs or drink alcohol get separated from their spirit.
I've heard that.
Now, if somebody gets separated from their spirit because of drug abuse or they weren't ready to leave because they've died a violent death, then I think if there's that separation of body and spirit like that, or the Indians say drugs and alcohol will punch holes in your spirit. If you beat your spirit up or yourself up, you may wind up being grounded here.
Well, that would seem to happen, wouldn't it? Story after story after story.
And like I say, they looked into it, and they had found out that, yes, a woman had died there years earlier, and then later on they looked into it and discovered that, the cause of death was a heroin overdose. And this is one very angry spirit. Some people get in that house, and they're fine. Some people go in there, and they aren't fine.
Well, if it does punch holes in the spirit, that's a big hole.
Yeah, they tried to get my girlfriend to babysit out there, house sit rather, and when she found out about the house, she didn't want to go. And so there's some sensible information for your listeners, too.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it, sir, and I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Right, bye. You ask yourself that question, would you go into a haunted house if you knew it was haunted, if the story was that it was haunted? And there were spirits lingering there, would you go in?
Well, I have a story for you that'll probably won't send goosebumps up your spine. It'll probably make you go, oh, isn't that sweet, if that's possible. I had an aunt that I was very, very close to, actually a great aunt, very close to her. She was I just always kind of looked up to her in life. She was kind of my...
Sure, mentor.
My mentor, thanks. And I had gone out to the cemetery, as I do once a month, to put flowers on her grave and kind of trim the grass and all that.
Right.
And as I was driving around the curve, you have to go down a hill and around a curve to get out of the cemetery, she ran out in front of my car, and I thought, no, I'm seeing things, but when something runs out in front of your car, what do? You
slam on the brakes.
I got rear-ended by 2 other cars, one of them being the security guard at the cemetery. I jumped out of the car thinking, oh, my God, I'm going to pay for this one through the nose. Went back to make sure the people in the other 2 cars were okay, and both of them said, well, that woman shouldn't have run out in front of you like that. And I said, well, you saw her too? And they said, of course we saw her. And I said, well, I don't really remember what she looked like. I knew what she looked like, but, I wanted to check things out.
Now, when you went around to check the front of your car, there was, I take it, no woman.
There was no dent. I mean, I didn't hit her. She just kind of ran out in front of the car, across the street, and up this hill towards where there's kind of some woods. And there was a family in the car behind me and the security guard all saw exactly the same person. A year after that, I went to the cemetery, drove down the hill, went around the corner, and the same exact thing happened again. And I was rear-ended.
You're wrong.
Another car.
You're wrong, sir. This is a goosebump story.
They saw the same person. And I guess the point that I'm getting at is I see my aunt all the time. I see her when I'm in town. I don't know if it's somebody that looks like her. But I just feel that she has a lot to do with the things that have been happening in my life. I feel like she's always guiding me.
Yeah, do you tend to see her at critical junctures in your life?
You know, that's funny you should say that. A month ago, I was in the hospital facing major surgery, and the door opened one night, and she came in and sat on the bed, took my hand, and said, "The doctors are wrong. They've misdiagnosed you. You need to tell them that." The next morning, I asked the doctor to rerun tests because I felt something wasn't right, and sure enough, the tests had come out wrong, and I didn't need surgery. So,
oh, man. All right, sir, I've got to run. We're out of time, but believe me, that's a prime...
You're a lot. She's there, and she's taking care of me, so I have a good guardian angel.
Thank you for the call. My gosh, what a story. Didn't mean to cut you off, but we're out of time, and I think we got the substance of your story, and believe me, sir, you're wrong. That's a big goosebump story. This story from the Associated Press, it's Dayline Capitol Hill. With its 200-year history, it's not surprising that the United States Capitol building is the scene of many a ghost story. Clarence Brown, president of the U.S. Capitol Historical Society and a former congressman himself, says over the past 2 centuries, both the bold and the faint-hearted claim to have seen or heard spirits at the Capitol. There's the story of the demon Black Cat, reported over the years by more than one guard. There is the sighting of former President-turned-Congressman John Quincy Adams, who died near the floor of the old House chamber in 1848. And there are those who smelled baking bread from the Capitol basement long after Union forces ceased using a secret tunnel as a Civil War bakery. Then there's this touch of Nevada story for you that I found particularly fascinating. It comes from a newspaper that you probably don't read, that we get in a little town where I live called Pahrump, Nevada. It's a little newspaper called the Gateway Gazette. It's the Thursday, October 28th edition. And the story is by Dave Downing, who is a Gazette staff writer, and it's entitled The Ghosts of the Mizpah Hotel. About 2 months ago, I bellied up to the bar at one of my favorite watering holes, the Mizpah Hotel Casino in Tonopah. My son had come up from Las Vegas to visit, and we were having a late-night drink. It was about 1 in the morning. You see, about 1 in the morning. These are the times, ladies and gentlemen, where these things occur. A fellow, I would guess to be in his 40s, came up from behind us, sat at the bar next to me. I glanced at him, seeing a dozen or 2 tattoos on his arm, decided to avoid a conversation. I heard him order a beer. When the beer arrived, he upended the bottle, guzzled down a slug. The bottle hit the bar with a whack, and he looked at me and said, "Boy, that's a hell of a hologram they've got in the elevator." Huh? The elevator, he said. I've never been there before. They've got an incredible hologram in there. I don't understand. He said, "Oh, I thought you were a local. The Mizpah has a hologram of a beautiful woman dressed in old-fashioned clothing. It's in the elevator, man. It does look real." I told him that I'm a local. I also told him there's no hologram in the elevator. He looked at me strangely, drank his beer, and left. A few minutes later, he returned to the bar. He looked upset. "You're right," he exclaimed. "There is nothing in the elevator." He walked back toward the elevator, and I never saw him again. Had the lady in red appeared again? There are many strange tales from the hallowed Halloween halls of the Mizpah. The most popular tale involves the murder of a pretty young lady on the 5th floor of the hotel. She was a lady of the evening and became involved in a love triangle. That's according to the assistant manager now of the Mizpah, Sue Harmon. She was caught with another man by the man who was madly in love with her. He stabbed her to death. According to Harmon, there have been many sightings of the lady in red. She resides on the 5th floor, but she'll wander all over the hotel. She loves to pull pranks. She's the one that causes the Keno board to light up. Wait till you hear this. Many employees and visitors to the Mizpah claim they've seen the Keno board begin to flash numbers as if a game were in progress. The Keno boards at the Mizpah haven't been connected to an electrical source for years. Many claim she can be heard at night, moaning and walking about the floors. She's been known to carry on a conversation with people. We'll only later find out no one is there. Sharon Mitchell of Round Mountain relates a story about the lady in red that occurred to her son Stuart when he was working at the hotel during its reconstruction in the late 70s. Sharon was a dealer and a pit boss for the Mizpah at the time. 2 of my sons worked after school at the Mizpah, helping to remove walls and do general construction work. Stuart was 14 or 15 years old at the time. One night, Stuart was unusually quiet on the way home. I asked him if he was feeling okay, but he said something weird had happened during work. Stuart told his mother, "I was working down in the basement tearing out a wall. There was a woman with me. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was taking the wall down. She told me she didn't want the wall taken out. I asked her who she was, and she said, 'I live here, and I don't want that wall taken down.'" Stuart went to get his boss. When they returned, the lady was, of course, no longer there. Sharon told her son that it didn't seem much to be upset about. Stuart responded, "But, Mom, it isn't Halloween, but she was dressed in a costume." According to Sharon, her son then described the lady as wearing a long dress with a bustle that looked like turn-of-the-century clothing. He was very upset. Mitchell said she really didn't believe in ghosts, but if they exist anywhere, they're at the Mizpah. Pat Dennis, a former Mizpah waitress, is one who has personally seen the Keno board begin to light up. I don't know for a fact that the Keno board isn't connected to an electrical source, so I can't really say that the lady in red is involved. Who knows? Maybe they left a wire or two connected to some source by accident. Dennis says she's heard that the lady in red will steal guests' shoes, but only if the shoes are red. George Tooley, a former slot mechanic for the Mizpah, has seen that board light up, the Keno board. It would start playing a game. Usually it would happen during the graveyard shift. All of a sudden, the numbers would start lighting up as if a game were being played. You'd get about 20 numbers. They'd stay up for a while, then all go out. It happened 3 times one night. He added that the controls for the Keno board, get this, were removed in 1979 when the hotel underwent reconstruction. There are no controls for the board, he said. Waitress Linda Evans has had direct experiences with the lady in red. She's always been kind to me, but she doesn't like men, she said. Evans tells a tale of horror involving her son and grandson. Her son was 26, the grandson 13 at the time. "I was in the employees section resting. I'd had only 2 hours sleep and I was exhausted. My son and grandson arrived and I opened the door for them. They just stood there staring beyond me. They looked as if they were in a trance. I asked them if they were coming in. They just stood and stared. I finally turned around and looked behind me, but I didn't see anything. I turned back to them and my grandson said, 'That's the first time I ever saw a person without a head.'" The boy told her they saw a woman dressed in red walk across the room and through a wall. She was holding her head in her hands. They both said they saw the same thing. He also tells a story of a band that had been contracted by the Mizpah. They heard stories about the lady in red decided to hold a party in their room. During the party, they began asking for her, a sort of seance. The lady not only appeared to them, but bothered them for the rest of the week. She wouldn't leave them alone. There are other stories about different ghosts in the Mizpah. Jean Heidman, Mizpah desk clerk, tells about a woman from Las Vegas that had a room on the 5th floor. She woke up and saw a man at the foot of her bed. She began screaming, made quite a bit of racket. Next morning, while she was checking out, she apologized for making such a scene. She explained to me that it was the worst and most realistic nightmare she'd ever had. She went to the Pittman room, that's the Pittman room, for breakfast. She was drinking coffee, glanced at the pictures on the wall. Suddenly she dropped her coffee cup and began screaming again, "That's him! That's the man!" She was looking at a picture of Senator Key Pittman. According to Jean Bridges, a former waitress, the Mizpah used to have a security guard named Otis. Otis was a huge man that others would be afraid of, big macho type. Bridges and others told how Otis was scared to death of the 5th floor. He would refuse to go up there without someone with him. At some time in his Mizpah career, he had gone to the 5th floor room because of a loud party. And that's where he saw her. And I'm going to stop there. There's more. But that's a little tale of what's going on here in Nevada. And at one of the brothels in Pahrump, Nevada, the locals and everybody there is known for a very long time, there is a ghost. Now, I guess Nevada is a likely candidate for this sort of thing. I don't know why. Our history, some of it in the past, violent. And that brings me to why so many ghosts appear, or so many spirits appear to remain here on this world. I think they can't go anywhere else. Frequently, when a death is unexpected, early, violent, when there's something utterly unsatisfied here on earth, unrequited love frequently will bring a spirit that seems to stay. Other reasons, I don't know it all. I just know that I've heard the stories, and this morning you're going to hear them. That's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about ghosts, poltergeists, spirits.
I'd like to, well, thank you for taking my call, by the way.
Yes.
I'd like to tell you a story. My old grandparents, great-great-grandparents, they used to own a mine up near Grimes Creek, which is near Idaho City, up in Idaho.
Is that a gold or silver mine or what?
It's a gold mine.
Gold mine.
It's an old gold mine. Idaho City is an old gold mining town.
Right.
Anyways, long story short, my great-grandfather and his brother owned a mining company, and the mine, they sold all of them but one, and we kept one in our family. And I'd been hearing stories and stories and stories about the mine and how much gold was still up there, and they never mined it because it wasn't profitable for them, because they would have had to pay the workers and everything.
Sure.
And I went up there one day, and I got a map and went up to the roads above Grimes Pass, which is where the mine is, and I stopped in to check it out. And I happened to walk in the mine, and I looked across the creek, and there was like this old, I don't know how to describe it, a Victorian-style house. It was about 3 stories tall, just a beautiful, beautiful, almost like farmhouse. And I thought, that's really a neat house, and it didn't look like it had been dilapidated at all. And so I took my little flashlight and I went into the mine, and as I walked in, I found a set of old mining tools, like a hand drill and a pickaxe and like a pan also.
Okay.
And so I walked back into the mine, and I stopped, and I was like, gee, I wonder where the gold is. And I'm looking around, and I can't find it. And so I start drilling into the wall with these old tools. And
a gentleman dressed in a business suit and a top hat, almost like 1890s, 1900s era comes, and he looks at me and he says, "You're doing that wrong, son."
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I said, "Excuse me?" And I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, where did this guy come from?
Yeah.
And I say, "Okay, what's the right way?"
How about who are you and what are you doing here?
Well, it didn't even cross my mind.
All right.
I guess I had what you would call gold fever, if that makes sense.
He was going to show you how to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, it does make sense. Humans have an unnatural attraction to gold. All humans do.
It's bizarre how much gold will affect people.
You're correct.
So, anyways, he comes over without missing a beat, and he takes the tools out of my hand, and he grabs my hand, and he walks me down to the edge of this mine shaft, and he sinks the pickaxe into the wall, and he starts drilling, and he's like, "Okay, the rest is up to you." And I said, "Okay, thanks for your..." And I turned around, and he was gone. The guy had just disappeared, and so I sunk my pickaxe in there, and sure enough, out popped a nugget. And
he took you right to it.
Right to it. And so I ended up walking out. And as I happened to go back to the car when I was all done and everything, and I'd gotten about 3 good-sized nuggets, I happened to look over, and the house wasn't there anymore. The house had been...
The house was gone?
The house was gone.
Wow.
It had almost disappeared, but out front there was still this old hitching post. And I walked over to the hitching post, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. And I looked on the hitching post, and it had Wells, which was the name of my great-great-grandfather. That was his last name.
Right.
Inscribed on the post. And so I don't wonder if maybe my great-grandfather came back to give me some mining tips.
My God, the power, though. That's really a cool story. Really a cool story. Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Right, take care. That's really a cool story. What if the entity on the other side, the relative, has enough power to not just manifest himself, but manifest an entire setting that this man would see? A home, an old ranch house that's not there anymore, that wasn't really there in the first place, along with himself in period dress and all the rest of it, taking him right to the gold. That's quite a bit of power. That's a lot of power.
Well, it actually comes out of Bethesda, Maryland, which is on the north end of Washington, D.C., and I'm on the south end.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, I'm calling to tell you about a friend's house in North Carolina. Was built about 15 years ago, right out on the Outer Banks, one dune away from the ocean.
Yeah, Hurricaneville.
Yes. And we've known these people for a long time. They have a very large, multi-generational family, and they're always inviting other people to come and stay there. And so we went down one time to visit, and she said, "Now, I want to warn you before you come that we do have a ghost, or multiple ghosts."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, great. I thought that was super. I have my chance." And she told us that there was a woman who walks through one certain bedroom who wears a dark, long, body-fitting dark vest with many buttons down the front, and she has a white blouse underneath it with long, loose sleeves. And that one time she walked in the room, and somebody had put a crib with a baby there, and she walked right through the crib and the baby, and the mother was just horrified, took the child and went to a motel for the night, never stayed in the house again.
A normal reaction, I think.
The night we were there, my friend's giant 6'4" brother had slept out on the porch because the house was really crowded. And he came running in the middle of the night, terrified, because of all the boot stamping out on the porch. There were all these loud footprints. So the other aspect of this was that in the wintertime, when neither she nor her family members are there, there is one permanent family just on the other side of some bushes, you know, the length of a normal two-house away. So it's maybe 100 feet away.
Right.
And they complained to her one time because of all the party noise all winter.
Huh.
And yet they didn't know who was staying there, so they were concerned that someone was breaking into the house because there were lights all night, and their lights would move from one room to another as though people were not using the electricity, which was turned off for the winter, so they were using candles or oil lights or something, and that there was all this raucous partying going on all the time. So finally my friend contacted not an exorcist, but a psychic who lived down in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And over the years, she got to know the locals, and she had heard about this woman, contacted her, and she came to visit the house and said that there was a shipwreck on that particular site, and that when they constructed the house, it had dug into it, and the ghosts were all disturbed, but they figured, well, if you put a house here, we'll just live in it. But that they were actually shipwreck victims. So the exorcist or the psychic, I don't know whether she did magic, you know, I don't know what sort of thing she did, but she asked them to leave, that it was alarming renters, and the family didn't mind, and they accepted it, but would they please leave?
Did it work?
Yes.
They left.
Uh-huh.
So,
and the neighbors said they now see lights in the wintertime, in the dead of winter, when there's no one else around, you know, for miles, because this is just this narrow.
So you mean they still occupy it when nobody's there?
But not their house.
But not the house.
But they see
You
lights.
mean just in the area?
Yes,
so
on a
in other
nearby
words,
dune, there are still these little flashing lights as though people are having a party, and they hear laughter and singing.
That. All right. Oh, well, that's pretty weird. That's another. So in other words, you could request that a spirit or a ghost that's occupying the place of its death leave the place of its death and have that happen, but have them stay close by. So what do we have here? Polite ghosts? Or spirits that have to follow the words of the living? Not sure.
Yeah, this story begins in a hospital, actually, before the ghost, if you can call it that, came about. But my dad died about 15 years ago, and the night before he died, some people told me to tell him that they had been to the hospital but hadn't been in to see him because they felt like they needed to just keep it together and be support for the family and stuff.
Sure.
And the next morning, he died, and immediately after that, just right at the same time, a clock stopped in their house and would not start back up again. A couple of months later, I was on a train from St. Louis to Minneapolis, which was, several hundred miles away from where my dad died.
Right.
And when my dad had been in the hospital, he was in a coma for about a week. I kept meeting people that he worked with who were coming by the hospital, and they kept telling me, your dad is really proud of you. He talks about you all the time. And that phrase, your dad is really proud of you, is important. Because several months later, when I'm on this train, I went to the car behind the one we were riding in, which they had cleared out the car because they were going to drop it off overnight. But I had to go back there to use the bathroom because the bathroom in our car didn't work. There was one man back there.
Right.
And a very old black man with white hair. And as I passed him, we made eye contact, and he said, I talked to your father the other day. He's really proud of you.
Just out of the blue, he said that.
Just out of the blue, yeah. And so this was in the middle of the night. I was about half asleep, so I didn't really think a whole lot about it. And as I got back to the car, I told the steward in the car I was riding in about it. Said, there's an elderly gentleman back there who seems a bit confused. Can you go back and check on him? And so the
we've got less than a minute here.
Okay, the steward goes back there and comes back up a couple minutes later by himself, just looking at me like, "What are you talking about?"
There was nobody there.
Nobody. So I think I got a message from beyond.
It sounds very much like you did. Hi, what is your... Tom, okay. Where are you, Tom?
I'm from Chicago.
Okay.
This happened approximately about 11 years ago.
Yes, Tom.
It's around 3 in the morning. I was coming home from a party with a friend. We're driving down Roberts Road, and I know you're thinking Resurrection Mary, but this has nothing to do with Resurrection Mary.
Okay.
There's somebody standing by the curb with a lantern, and he got in front of the car, and we slowed down. He walked towards the car. We looked. He had one. It was February. He had like one of his arms was out, like a bandage was hanging, and it was like stained. It looked like maybe blood, whatever. This was like really gruesome looking. His mouth was agape. His eyes were like rolled in the back of his head. His leg was missing, and you could see like a translucency through him. We just looked at each other and just like, whoa. We drove on. He walked in back of the car, and the other car, we looked in back, and the other car just went right through him.
Went right through him?
Went right through him.
And I'm sorry, who was with you? Who saw it?
A friend. We were in a car.
And you both saw it?
We both saw it, and he was right by the side of us. We drove, and then he continued to walk across the street, and there was another cemetery. It was Bethany. He was walking to the other cemetery, and there was another car in back that drove right through this apparition. I mean, that blew me away. I was like, for like a year, I'm telling you.
So there's no doubt in your mind then about ghosts, right?
Oh no, I have so many paranormal experiences, but that was probably the most spooked out one I've ever had.
Of course. I mean, when you see that with your own eyes, and
I had a witness too.
And then another set of eyes sees it.
And then we called Justice Police, and they didn't want to, get into it. And then I called Richard Crow.
Well, can you blame them?
Of course.
They want bodies.
Of course.
Yeah, they want bodies. All right, thank you.
This happened to my family, about 15 years ago when my daughters were about 4 years old. And my ex-wife and I sublet a house for the summer. And shortly after we moved in, we started, my ex and I argued a great deal, and our daughters started having nightmares. And they would tell us that both of them had the same dreams on different nights, and would tell us that they saw a red lady in their room.
A red lady?
Red lady. This woman that was all dressed in red. Huh. And this went on for the whole time we were there. And shortly before we moved, we were talking to the neighbors trying to figure out what was going on, because it was clear that there was something there, some energy in the house.
Sure.
And found out talking to the neighbors that the original owners of the house, this was not a real old house, it was about 10 years old probably, the original family, the wife had committed suicide in the children's room, had cut her wrists, and that when one of the children came home from school that day, they found their mother in their bedroom covered in blood. And so we, made the connection that was some energy residual from that was what my daughters had been dreaming about that whole summer, and we were happy to
well,
move out.
I assume that you're aware that people who investigate know about ghosts are almost universally agree that people who commit suicide tend to stick around more than others at a much greater rate than others. Now, I'm not exactly certain what that means, and I've always tried to think, what might that mean, that a suicide would be stuck here? There's some sort of course, biblical, I think, prohibition against taking your own life. So it may mean that for a while you don't get to go where you're supposed to go otherwise.
It could be. It could also be that just the energy of such things are so intense and so horrible that they imprint themselves on the place for years after.
I think that I would rather believe that explanation rather than thinking it is a soul stuck in some horrible repetitive thing. Thank you very much. Suicides.